take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
You know, a lot of the time I kind of come on here and I start bitching about the internet and how bad it is, but it allows me to meet cool people like my good friend Greg here. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. We connected on Twitter, the power of Twitter, and I know there's kind of like a big mental health community on Twitter especially, and I guess that's kind of how we found each other. And you came to me with quite the story, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we should just get right into it. Take me to the beginning of it. And don't leave any detail unturned.
Okay, fair enough. So I work for an organization called Ottawa Carleton Life Skills. It's based here in Ottawa, and we do developmental services work, so we're a non-for-profit organization. And I've been with them for about 8.5 years now. And back on May the 5th, 2012,
Okay.
I was working at my regular home. So we take care of adults with severe developmental and physical disabilities. And I was dropping off one of our residents at a family member's house. And I was coming back down. I was driving our agency vehicle. So we drive like a paratranspo style bus. And I was driving back to the group home when I pulled up to a stoplight. And I was looking at the cars behind me because these buses are huge, so sometimes they can't see the lights behind us. And I was looking up at the rearview mirror and to make sure the cars behind me had stopped. And I heard this loud bang. So my eyes shot forward and I saw two people flying through the air. And I just witnessed a minivan hit a motorcycle in front of me.
Oh, my God.
So it was a man and his wife. That were heading down the same, it was Saint Laurent, right in front of the Saint Laurent Center. And I got out of the car. I'm a trained paramedic, so that's what I went to school for.
Okay.
And immediately started running towards the accident. And the man, during the accident, the impact was so hard that he was wearing one of those bucket-style helmets, and it came right off. So I ran and did my best to help him, but I couldn't. And he ended up passing away while I was working on him. And it was 3:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday. So picture Saint Laurent Boulevard on a good day.
Yeah.
Traffic's pretty brutal. So help didn't come fast enough. But the biggest problem was, and I think the hardest part of that situation for me, was that I knew what needed to be done. And so he was quite a large man. And nobody can see me right now, but I'm about 5'6". I weigh like 140 pounds. But he was quite a bit larger. He was probably closer to 260, I'd say. And he had landed face down. And when he had stopped breathing, I knew that I needed to roll him over. But because of the mechanism of the injury and like the accident, I also knew that I needed to protect his spine as best as I could. But I couldn't do it alone. So it was, like I said, it was 3:00 on Saint Laurent Boulevard. And there was a lot of people that were around and nobody would help. So I was asking people for help, and a lot of people were on their phones and a lot of people were out of their cars and kind of coming over to where the accident site was. But at the time, I didn't really understand why nobody was helping. Like I was yelling instructions. The wife was conscious the whole time. She had done almost like a forward flip and landed like in a seated position and had hit herself in the face with her own knees. She was hurt beyond that as well. But she was awake the whole time. And the thing that was really difficult for me to deal with was that she was facing us. So she was seeing everything that I was doing with to help her husband. And at the time, I didn't know their relationship because you don't have time to figure that stuff out. I just assumed. So I was asking people to, even if they wouldn't help me with him, at least move her out of the way or turn her so she didn't need to see this, because I knew that I needed to roll him over at some point, and I didn't know what that was going to look like. So nobody was helping, and at this point he had stopped breathing, and I did my best to get my arms under him and do like a modified spinal turnover, which basically is a way that a single person can do a rollover of somebody that needs to have CPR while protecting their spine in the best possible way that they can. It's really difficult to do, but I got to a point where I knew that I couldn't waste any more time. So what ended up happening was that because I'm so much smaller, to get under him, I had to really work my arm under, and I ended up cutting myself all over my arms with pieces of glass and stuff like that. So as I was struggling to do that, someone finally ran out of the crowd and grabbed him by his belt loop and helped me roll him over. So I got him rolled over, and I was still protecting his spine and his head at this point. And when I rolled him over, I was able to see the extent of his injuries. But I was also able to see that like he needed immediate CPR. And I went to give this guy that had run out of the crowd instructions on what we do next. And unfortunately, he ran away. So I was back to having no one again. So I could hear the sirens coming at this point down Saint Laurent. They were coming from the east. And I just remember thinking, like, they can't get here soon enough. And eventually, a second person ran out of the crowd. And it was right before the ambulance pulled up. And he was an off-duty paramedic. So he started doing compressions, and I was still holding the head. And unfortunately, I got a lot of blood on me. And because I was already cut, I had my blood and his blood mixed together. And the thing that killed me the most was that at this point, still no one had helped his wife. So because she was awake and alert, she was in shock. Like, she wasn't responding to any of my questions or anything like that, because I was trying to get information from her, including, are you hurt, anything. So no one had ever moved his wife. So when the paramedics finally arrived, 2 came to us, 2 went to her, and the screaming and the upset was something that will live with me forever. And I wasn't supposed to be there in that moment. Like, the only reason why I was because I was at work and I had just dropped one of our guys off. So before reporters or media, anything like that, got there, the police had brought me back to our agency vehicle, which, like I said, was a big paratransit. So we both just got into the back, and I filled out a report. So the gentleman's name was Mike Jeffries. He was the one that was killed in the motorcycle accident. And his wife survived. She had multi-system trauma, but was awake the whole time. So I had gone back to the bus. We were filling out reports and everything like that. And the police officer said, is that yours or is it his? And I was still kind of shock. Like, I'd seen my share of trauma, just doing ride-alongs in school, and believe it or not, even being a lifeguard with the city of Ottawa. Like, you see enough accidents to know how to navigate a situation like that. But I'd never really seen violence like that sudden and that impactful firsthand. So I was in shock from that. And when he said that, I said, I don't know what you mean. He's like, you're covered in blood. And I looked down, and I remember a fireman had come over and given me this solution that they used to clean their hands and stuff, disinfect and clean your hands. But the blood kept coming. So that was when we found out that it was mine and his. So the paramedics that were there thought the best thing to do would be to take me right away to the hospital and just have my blood tested and decide whether or not I wanted to do any kind of like medication treatment, just to make sure that if there was any anti-antigens or anything in his blood, that I wouldn't get it as well. But we needed to move fast, so they took me to the Queensway Carleton, and I did that. So the reason why that part of the story is relevant, and the reason why I said before media got there, was that once media arrived on scene, they interviewed the off-duty paramedic, and they talked to him about the situation, and they credited him for at least restarting the heart. Like, they used a defibrillator and they were able to restart the heart, but unfortunately the gentleman still passed away on the way to the hospital. Never regained consciousness. And I'll touch back on the media side of the story in a bit, but So my work at the time, I had to call them and let them know that I obviously wasn't coming back to my shift, and told them what happened, and they got me to fill out an incident report and things like that. So this was back in 2012. At the time, there was nothing in place for any kind of mental injuries, and there certainly wasn't any kind of education or anything like that. So I took, I think, 2 days off work, and just stayed at home and just kind of like digested what had happened, digested what I saw, and decided that the best thing that I could do was, so as it turned out, everything was fine with the blood. Like I have some cuts, and I still have scars on my arms from the cuts, but they were fine. Physically, I was fine, and I didn't really know what state I was in, because I never really allowed myself a second to kind of think about that. It was more like, I'm physically okay, I want to go back to work. And I mentioned that I work in disability services, so when I went back to work, there's a lot of screaming in the home and stuff like that. And after about a week, the screaming was starting to really get to me. And it was only certain people, like a certain pitch, would really bother me. But
Describe, sorry, I'll cut you off because I know you've been talking for quite a while, and that you wet your whistle a little bit. But tell me what it was like, help paint a picture of when you say it bothered you.
Yeah.
What does that look like, or what did that look like to you? What did that feel like?
Yeah, so at the time, like I have to look back on it and think about like what it felt like, because at the time, all I was feeling was like immediate anger, like a lot of like anger, and not like violence or like outburst or like I'd lose control of my emotions, but it would be like I would hear a scream, and like I said, it had to be a certain pitch. It was like if it's a female scream, it can be like kind of low, but it's a higher pitch scream that really sets me off. And when I would hear that, it would be like the type of anger and frustration you feel when you stub your toe. Like, that like sudden like burst of, it just comes out. It's like uncontrollable. You have to do something. You have to grab your toe, or you have to like whatever, you swear, you yell. So it would feel like that as soon as I started hearing that scream. But the thing is that it was, because of the line of work that I'm in, it can be constant. It can be a full day ordeal if they're having a bad day. And what was happening was that I recognized that I was getting angry like that, and I'd try and keep myself busy, and I'd try and keep myself not thinking about it, or maybe get to a different part of the house where I wasn't hearing it as loud. But by me doing that, it was exhausting me. So by the end of the day, what would happen is I'd be like, I can't do this again tomorrow. And I'd be up all night thinking about, like, can I go to work? I really need to go to work because I need to pay bills. But if I go to work, am I going to be able to do that? And if that screaming starts again, am I going to be able to control that anger, like that frustration? And I never talked to anybody about it.
Did you have, so were you familiar with like mental health or like mental illnesses? Like any, like, did you have any symptoms beforehand, before this incident? Or like, was this all of a sudden like just a brand new world?
It wasn't a brand new world. Like I had panic attacks in the past, and I'd had anxiety in the past, usually like in a social setting. But the what I was feeling in this moment, and like I said, this is about a week after the accident happened at this point, where it finally started kind of sinking in, and I was really feeling this. So when I really started to notice that something was wrong was that I started going home, and like I said, I'd start debating on whether or not I could do this again tomorrow, like if I could hear that again tomorrow, and it would start keeping me up at night. And that's when like about a week, maybe a week and a half later, the nightmares started. So what was happening was that I'd hear this screaming all day at work, and then I'd go home and I'd be exhausted from just kind of like running from those like demons, I guess, right? So I go home, I'd be exhausted, I'd go to sleep, and the screaming would bring me right back to the accident scene. And what would happen is that it was almost like I was living like a Groundhog Day type scenario, where I'd pull up in the van, I'd look in the rearview mirror, I'd hear the bang, I'd see the people, I'd start working, no one would help. And even if I woke up, I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep until I finished the scenario. Like, it had to play out. So like, I'd be sitting up in my bed thinking, okay, this is what I should have done next. This is what I immediately should have done. I shouldn't have waited for anybody. I should have just rolled him over. I should have got up, spun his wife around, and then came back. But I was so preoccupied with the idea that something might have been wrong with his spine, and that if I could help him or if I could save him, that he would be, there'd be long-term damages, and whether or not I'd be liable for that. Like, things like that were going through my mind. And it started becoming an obsession where I was almost every night I'd be up from like, I'd fall asleep and I might sleep for an hour or two, and then I'd wake up and I'd have to play out that scenario, and then I would start thinking about, did I do enough? Did I do it right? Did I make the wrong decision? How's his wife? Like, what is she thinking? Does she even know who I am? Or like, if she does, what does she remember? Like, was I the guy that failed them, or am I the guy that tried to help out of a crowd of people that wouldn't? So it became this obsession where I had to play out the scenario all the time. And as I played it out, I started feeling more and more immense feelings of guilt, and I couldn't sleep. So I just stopped sleeping. And if I went to work, I tried talking to some people about it, and I think that was my first big mistake, was that the first person I ever really opened up to about it was a friend of mine, that we were at a party and we were having a drink, and he had asked me about the accident, and he's like, how are you feeling? And I just said, I started crying, and I said, like, I did everything that I could and no one would help me. Is there something wrong with me? Like, why would nobody come out? Like, was I yelling too much? Were people afraid? Did they know what was going to happen to me and they didn't want that to happen to them? And I just remember crying, and he was like, man, let's just drink this away and never talk about it again. Like, you're going to be fine. Let's just, don't even think about it. Have another drink. Let's go outside until you calm down. And I went home, because I couldn't go back into the party at that point. And I started feeling like I couldn't talk to anyone about it, because I don't think that anybody really understood the impact that I had, or that it had on me. Mm-hmm. And going back to that, the media part, where I had been taken away before media had arrived. Not like I'd want to talk to anybody, but at another party, it had come up again, and someone was just asking, because at this point it had costed me a relationship that I was in. So I was seeing somebody for about 6 months or 8 months, and my behavior became so erratic and I was not sleeping that it became detrimental to the relationship. I had a short fuse. I was yelling a lot. I was getting stressed, and it ended up causing me this relationship that I was in. So that came up at a party, and as I was explaining the situation and the scenario and how it impacted me and stuff like that, somebody at the party said, well, were you even there? Like, did it actually really happen, or did you just see it and you're giving it this spin because the media interviewed the guy that was part of the rescue? And for me at that point, I was like, I don't know if I can ever talk to anybody in this circle of friends that I'm in at that time, if I can talk to any of these people about it, because either they don't believe me or they don't understand it at this point. And rumors started that I wasn't even there. So thankfully, the people that I work with, they knew I was there, because they had to come and pick me up. They had to bring me a change of clothes. They had to get that agency vehicle, which was in all the newscasts. When all the media did arrive, the van was left there. They took me to the hospital in an ambulance. So my first mistake that I ever made was not going to a doctor first and talking to just a friend, and a friend that's not qualified to give advice, a friend that's not, maybe not educated on how to handle a situation like that. And they took the only way out that they knew, which was, let's bury this. You're going to be fine. Man up. And for those that couldn't see, quotation marks, man up.
Well, I think in 2012, I think on more maybe a medical side, of course, people understood what PTSD is and trauma, and but like if you just ask the regular person, like this whole thing about mental health and mental illnesses really only started to take off in at least normal conversation, like 2014, 2015, maybe.
Yeah.
2012 is when like I started like, medication and on my journey. And even then, like I say the same boat, like I didn't understand what was happening to me because no one talked about it. So I didn't even know to go to anybody because I didn't recognize really anything was wrong. I was just in the moment, felt like shit. You know what I mean? So, to bring that up at a party with like regular day people who aren't around it on a day-to-day life through the profession back then, especially that, of course you're going to want to shut down after that because no one's probably ever heard anything like this before.
Yeah, and like at the time we were young, like 2012 I would have been, that was 7 years ago, so I would have been 28. And like I said, that was my biggest mistake because what ended up happening was after I'd lost that relationship and after I'd had those 2 failed conversations with like people that aren't qualified to have that kind of conversation at a time where it wasn't even really a hot topic, I decided that nothing was actually wrong and that what I was feeling was just me being a baby about it. And I never sought any help at all for the first 4 years after that.
Wow.
So what ended up happening is that obviously those feelings that I was having at work continued because those symptoms were never going away. If anything, they were getting worse. And at my worst was 2015 to 2016, and I missed 71 days of work over the course of 15 months. And a lot of those days were like single occurrences. So it's not like I was taking a long leave of absence and like really recovering and getting this fixed. It was me getting up in the morning, having a panic attack. I start work at 7 in the morning. So I'd have a panic attack at 6 in the morning and I'd call in sick and I'd say, I can't come to work today. And that happened 71 times during those 15 months. And when that happens at work and you're not talking about it to your employer, they start questioning whether or not you're suitable for employment with the agency anymore. And they started, they put me on review, which they call attendance management. They called it at the time. And what attendance management is they sit you down and they say, you need to fill out like a doctor's note if you're going to be missing this kind of work or this amount of work. And you need to let us know what we can do to make you better or to make your time here better. And you don't need to disclose what's wrong with you. We just need a doctor's note, and you need to tell us how we can accommodate so we can reduce your absences, which is fair. However, I was manning up, again, quotation marks, and I said, nothing's wrong with me. I'll be fine. I just need some time sometimes. And I wasn't talking to them about it. So what ended up happening was the manager that I had at the time started taking small, like not really punishable offenses or like offenses that needed to be punished, like small mistakes, and would do full write-ups and reprimands for them. So we're a unionized environment, and it's basically like a 3-strike you're out type thing. And I was on the verge of losing my job for these small things, and I thought that it was, I felt like I was being harassed and that I just needed some time, but at the same time I wasn't disclosing anything. So they're like, in reality is that maybe they were trying to find a way to let go of me because I was costing them a lot of money, but it's because I wasn't being open about it.
Yeah, to them, you might just be a bad employee or, like you said, like questioning you want to be there, but internally you're really struggling and not telling them about it. So
so it was kind of like it was a catch-22 that I'd put myself into. And so my work gave me this functional abilities form, and I brought it to my doctor. My doctor at this time was treating me for what she believed was a severe anxiety and depression. And even though she knew the occurrence, this is the thing with a GP, is that sometimes a GP is okay at a lot of things. Right. But they don't specialize in one particular thing. So at this point, she thought that I was being best treated for this depression and anxiety, and said that the functional ability form wasn't really relevant to my type of injury or my type of illness, because it was all about what can you lift, what can you bend, how long can you stand for. And so she just basically wrote at the bottom, after marking all the boxes, like, no, this doesn't affect Greg, no, this doesn't affect Greg, no, this doesn't affect Greg, at the bottom she just wrote, Greg will sometimes need to leave work or miss work for medical purposes, and he might have to do so on short notice. And that was it. And because my work wouldn't take any kind of diagnosis or anything like that, they saw that and just thought, well, we can't take her, this is credible because there's nothing wrong with you. So we ended up launching an investigation. I asked for an investigation to be launched because at this time I had 2 young kids. I had a newborn and a 2-year-old, and my wife wasn't working. So I was our only source of income, and this was my full-time job. So when this investigation started, management had been asked about my history and past managers and things like that. And they all basically said that Greg is a good worker, but we don't know how honest he's being with his health because he doesn't disclose it. And we've heard rumors, but that's all they are at this point until the doctor can confirm what's wrong. But they weren't accepting like that diagnosis.
And what's this time frame? So, the incident happened in 2012.
Yeah.
Where are we at now on the timeline?
So this was about 4 years later, I finally started seeking help. So we're in like 2016 at this point. And
Wow.
I had missed my 71 days of work at this point, and that's when I was at my worst.
Through that time. Okay.
Through that time.
Got
So
you.
no,
Right.
like,
20. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the 71 days was over the course of March 2015 to April 2016. So it's like
Okay.
May 2016. So it's 15 months and 71 days of work. So I had launched an investigation, and the lawyers on their side said that there wasn't enough evidence supporting my claim, and that we would have to proceed with going to arbitration at this point. So arbitration is basically court for a unionized environment. So as we were discussing moving towards the arbitration date, arbitration costs a lot of money on both sides, obviously. And as we would meet about once a month, like my employer, my union, myself, and we would be discussing what's come up and like if there's any way that we can rectify this situation before it goes to arbitration. And at one of them, at this point I had gone to see a specialist, and they had filled out that functional abilities form a little bit more appropriately, and had written down that I needed to miss extra work, and it was because of a mental health injury that I had suffered. And I finally got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in 2016. And that's when I finally went to a specialist and finally started getting the help that I needed and the treatment that I needed. So that form had been filled out, but the manager that I had at the time had kept that form and not submitted it to human resources. So my employer didn't know that form even existed. So when that came up, that's when we finally started realizing that something was actually wrong in that whole process. And we had missed this giant step, and I actually had a legitimate illness that needed to be treated and looked at. So we ended up settling before arbitration happened, and all I asked for was that my record was cleared. So all those tiny infractions had been removed, and my suspensions had been removed, and that I was repaid for any missed time, because I was suspended from work twice because of those. Like I said, it's like those 3 strikes you're out.
Right.
So it could be a minor infraction, but it's still, if you're on step 2, that means a 3-day suspension or whatever it was. So they had done that, and in this process, I'd spent so much time with them that we'd been during these meetings that they just said that they were looking to find a way to change the organizational culture, and they wanted to start this committee that would help create a more positive work environment for employees. And they had asked me if I'd be interested in joining it. And at this point I was still angry, so I said no. I said that I'm not interested. So this committee started, and it went for about 4 months. And I got a phone call in October of 2017 saying that they would really appreciate if I even just came into one, saw what it was all about, and if I can come with any kind of idea that would make the workplace better, that they'd want to hear it, and they'd want to hear it at a senior management level. And if it made sense, this is something that we could potentially do to improve the culture of our workplace. So for those that are listening that are unfamiliar with workplace culture, it's basically how an employee feels when they're at work, and when they feel in the environment. So I went to my first meeting, and at that meeting, I brought up a whole bunch of mental health statistics, because at this point I'd spent all that time that we were heading towards arbitration researching like crazy everything that I could about mental health and its impact and statistics in Canada, so I could use that if we went to court to say like I was right taking that time off work, and I knew that I couldn't be there and I couldn't be productive, and it could be dangerous to myself or the people that we take care of if I made a mistake because my mind was elsewhere, by giving them the wrong medication or whatever. So I had presented this idea to implement something that's called the National Standard of Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, which was designed by the Canadian Mental Health Commission or Association. And they said that they wanted to know more, and that they would give me a 15-minute or 20-minute presentation at the senior management meeting in April, but I needed to do all kinds of different things. So this is from October 2017 till April of 2018. I had to complete all these tasks, which was talk to our union and make sure that the union was on board with it and that they were okaying it. I had to talk to occupational health and safety and make sure that they understood their role and if we implemented this program. And then I had to find a mentor that would be able to guide us through the process. And they also wanted to know how much it would cost. And I said that at that point I was about 200 hours into my research. And I said that it's going to cost you nothing because the products that I've found are free. The national standard is free. And I'm donating my time. And I'm going to start doing this as a repayment for the time that I missed by not disclosing my mental health to you years earlier. And this is going to be, we're going to work with this together and we're going to make something special out of it. And they said, yeah. So I completed all those steps. We sat down at the senior management meeting in April. And in April of 2018, we became Canada's first developmental services agency to implement a mental health program for its employees. So what that meant was that there's no agency that does what we do in Canada has this same program, which is free and it's readily available to anybody to use and implement and research, but nobody's using it. So when we signed something that's called the Declaration of Commitment to the National Standard. So the Canadian Mental Health Association now lists us as somebody that's promised that we're going to implement a safe environment for our employees by implementing the national standard. We're going to take care of our employees' mental health. So with that, we started conducting all these employee surveys and making sure we could figure out what the problem areas were in our agency and trying to figure out how we can address it. So there's a survey that you can implement to your employees that allows you to narrow down to these 13 psychological factors, they're called. And out of those 13 factors, there's different frameworks that you can implement to address any problem areas that you have in your agency. So we conducted that survey, found out where our problem areas were, and then got to work on implementing the framework so we can repair the damaged areas. And it also shows you where you excel as well. So you can take kind of give like the sandwich feedback where you can tell your employees like we're doing really well here, maybe in work-life balance or in physical health and safety or employee engagement. However, we're doing really poorly in civility and respect and organizational culture. So this is where we're going to work on it. And you can get buy-in from employees that way. They know how they're doing. They know what your plan is to execute a plan. And so we launched these services. And as we started talking about them more and more on social media, and our executive director goes to all kinds of summits and things like that, and she started talking about it as well. And more people got interested in asking us how we did this and how difficult it is to implement. And we have started to respond to them by offering the services. So right now, we help agencies from all around the world via live Facebook sessions and just like one-on-one Skype meetings and things like that, implement their own mental health systems. And these products that we use, like I said, they were all free. They're all made by the Canadian Mental Health Association. And they're available to use anywhere in the world. So I've helped people in India. I've helped people in New Zealand. implement mental health programs for their employees, and it's using Canadian content, which we're pretty proud of. So it's been a wild ride, and it continues.
Yeah.
But our relationship at work is so much better now, and I'm fortunate that we had this visionary of an executive director that just kept pushing that that I pursue this project, and I find it special because they took their sickest employee, and instead of reprimanding or like taking away their job or not making them eligible for something as big as this, like I could have mentioned this and someone else could have taken that project and ran with it at the senior level. I think it's really admirable that they did that, because the reason why I wasn't telling my employer about my illness was that I was worried that I would be labeled unfit for advancement. I was worried that I would be an entry-level employee forever. I was worried that they would fire me because they'd see me as a negative impact to the work environment or a crybaby or whatever. So I spent years lying and not seeking help because of these small mistakes. And all I needed to do really to avoid any of this was just have that talk, with my employer, have that talk with a professional. And those mistakes almost cost me everything. They almost cost me my job. They almost cost me my marriage. But thankfully now, we're providing this service where we're going out and we're talking about it, and we're putting a face to recovery and a face to what most people are afraid of, and we're showing them that it's really not that bad. And I'm hoping that in doing so that we inspire other organizations to launch their mental health programs, and we are inspiring employees, but men in particular, to have these conversations with professionals and with their employers and just kind of disclose this information so they can get the help that they need, because it doesn't need to be as bad as it is. And seeking help is easily the best thing that I ever did.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because we kind of skipped that part where you went to see the specialist and you got that signed off. I'm interested to know, what was that turning point? So you resisted this for
a long time.
Yeah, 4 years.
4 years.
And then now you're going through this thing at work, and what was the point where you're like, that you decided you needed help, and like what happened?
So what ended up happening was that by not seeking professional help, I started self-medicating. So what that means is that I would get home at the end of the day, and what started with having it's not uncommon for somebody to get home and have a beer at the end of the day, but what is uncommon is when that beer turns into 6 to 10 per day. And I would get home from work and I would have a beer, which would turn into another beer. I would be complaining about whatever was happening at work, whatever was happening with my life, whatever was unfair or I felt was unfair to my wife. And I would have, it got to a point where I was drinking, like I said, between 6 and 10 beer a night. And physically, my body was feeling awful. I put on probably about 40 pounds. In between 2015 and 2017, when we had our second child. And so at this point, I was starting to seek help, but I still hadn't seen my specialist. And my second daughter had been born. And while it's a blessing, the terrible part of that is that her cry matches that pitch that I can't hear. So I was hearing it at work. I was coming home. I was drinking. I was a mess, physically and mentally. And one night I got home from work. I had just finished a 12-hour shift, and it was an awful one. I'd come home, and I was at a point where it was that need for a drink, because it was almost like that first beer kind of calms you down and you feel a little bit relaxed, but then I needed more. So it got to a point where the best way that I can explain it is, have you ever been stuck in rush hour? Full bladder, you need to pee, and all you can think about is how badly you need to pee. Everything's going to be fine once I pee. I need to make it to a bathroom. And you get that panic, and that's all you think about. That was me with alcohol. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. The anxiety wouldn't subside until I had a drink. So I got home, I had my drink, I spilt it, the baby started crying, and all I remember is that my wife had the baby. She was on the other side of the living room. Our other daughter was asleep. And the crying was just so loud that I turned around and I kicked a baby gate that was blocking our oldest daughter it prevented her from coming downstairs. So she was in bed, but I kicked the gate, and then I kicked it again, and I threw it, and it woke up our oldest. It obviously upset my wife and the baby. And my wife said to me, she's like, you need help. And it's not the type of help that like a week off of work is going to give you. It's not the type of help that a good night's sleep is going to give you. It's not the type of help that 4 more beers is going to give you. If you don't go see a doctor now, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. So that was my turning point. And so what I did was, at the time, like I said, I was the only one working. So I went to the West End Community Health Center in Canada, and they offer free counseling. And that was the first time that I really got an idea that something was wrong more than just anxiety and depression, which my GP at the time, she thought she was doing me a favor by saying, like, you need to exercise, you need to clean up your diet,
right?
Your
like
BMI is a mess.
Stuff,
yeah, you need to go for a jog. But it was the type of illness that a jog is not going to fix.
Yeah.
So it heard, I don't want to say downplaying, but maybe I wasn't giving her enough information as well, or she didn't think that I was there. Whatever it was, her downplaying had me downplay it. So when I finally sat down, and these counselors are, they're relatively new. Like when you go to these free counseling places, like a West End Community Healthcare, or they're students, and they are really invested in establishing a name for themselves, and they do it for either no to low cost. So the one that I saw, they offer 3 visits, and by the end of the 3rd visit, he was like, you need somebody more than me for this, and like I can continue to help you, but we need to like make a spin on why you're here. Like you said that you were here for anger, so maybe the next 3 sessions will be the anger and how your wife's reaction to your anger is, and then the 3 sessions after that. But he's like, I'm at a point now where like you need somebody that can really, really help you and break this down. Mm-hmm. So I started going to see an actual professional and get the counseling that I needed and the guidance that I needed. And she provided me with alternatives to how I was dealing with my panic attacks and things like that, which was basically self-medicating, or I felt like I needed alcohol to get through it. But she gave me alternatives like breathing techniques and EFT, I think it's called, where it's like a tapping on certain pressure points, if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of that, yeah, not referred to as EFT, but the tapping. Yeah,
so it's, and I can't remember the scientific name for it right now, but it was ways that I can kind of calm myself, and it's almost like a mindfulness exercise where I can kind of just stay in the moment and remove myself from whatever's upsetting me. So a combination of medication, those techniques, and just constantly going to my appointments was what really helped. Mm-hmm. And it also helped me build the documentation that I needed to save my job if that was going to be something that continued. So, I'd say that was 100% my turning point, was when my wife, and that whole incident, like I knew 100% that I was in the wrong the moment that I did that, and instantly felt regret and instantly knew that I needed help. But I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know who to ask, and then I didn't know how I was going to do it. So yeah, that was...
if you don't mind me asking, feel free not to answer it, but like when you got together with your girlfriend who turned into your wife, like did you like open up to her about all this? Like she knew kind of the background of maybe why you're kind of like doing that type of stuff?
Yeah, so funny enough, our first date ever, it came up. So not necessarily in that kind of, because at this point I still wasn't talking to anybody. Like we met in August of 2012, so it was like 4 months after the accident.
Oh wow, okay.
And we sat down, and I don't even know how it came up, But we talked about the accident. We talked about the impact that it had on me. And she just said that, like, for her in that moment, she was like, this is my person. And we've been together ever since. But I was pretty open with it. And I don't think that it got really bad in 2013. So probably about a year later, that's when I was starting to miss a lot of work, but not as much as I did in 2015, 2016. So she saw how not getting help took its toll on me year after year, and how bad I was getting. So like I said, I put on like 40 pounds. I was up to 190 at one point. And so she saw the physical effects and knew that I was getting up at night, but I always told her that it was heartburn. So she kind of contributed that to my poor diet and the alcohol consumption. And she was like, okay, well, you come to bed whenever you're ready and maybe have some Tums or whatever. But what was really happening was I'd be having those nightmares again, or I'd be having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And I'd go downstairs and I'd pace by myself. I never wanted to be a burden or like tell her about that, the mental portion of what was wrong. Because like obviously the scars, you can see the physical with what's wrong or what happened to me during that accident, but the mental part is invisible, and unless you're talking about it, no one will ever know. So I lied to her about it, and she knew that something else was going on, and it wasn't just heartburn, because nobody has heartburn every single day, and nobody sleeps like maybe 2 hours a night. So, but she didn't know how to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I was so guarded by my experience at those parties, where I just had these massive walls that I now call my armor. And I wouldn't let anybody in. So it affected friendships. It affected my work. It almost ended my marriage. Almost got me fired from work. And that's the dangers of not properly navigating mental health, or seeking the help that you need. And I definitely didn't until it was very close to too late.
Yeah. So where are you at now, at least with all that? Because, when you were talking about the incident, I could hear like some emotion in your voice about it. So going back to it,
Yeah.
When I give presentations or anything, you come to the finality of the story, and you go, so where am I now? And it's like, you expect it to be, and now I got help, and now we're here. I'm talking now, and everything's great. And I'm like, well, no, the actual reality is like, it's still a day-to-day battle.
Yeah.
I expect similar, but like, where does that leave you now? Like now you kind of have a purpose. You've reinvented yourself.
Yeah.
What are these scars like, mental scars for you now?
So, recovery for me now, we both know it's an infinite journey, right? Like there's no finite end. Like recovery is not a one and done scenario when it comes to mental health. You can be mentally healthy, but still in recovery from a mental illness. So I've come to terms with that, and just knowing that every day is going to be different. And it's funny that you mentioned the emotion, because there's days where I can tell the story start to finish, like we're talking right now. There's times where I tell the story and I get choked up at the start, and then eventually it gets easier. And then there's days where I just straight up cry. And it doesn't seem to matter the situation or how I was feeling that day before the story started being told. I felt awesome coming in here, still feel awesome, but there's some days where it's just really hard. And I think that I think at this point it's kind of looking back at how far I've come. I think that plays into the emotion that comes out in the story too, because like there's still pain associated with those years and that experience. Like regardless of how my relationship is with my wife or my employer now, or the new group of friends that I have, it's still that pain is still there, and there's still a lot that I wish never happened. Unfortunately, it did, but I'm moving forward now, and that's what I focus on, is just that forward movement. So, in terms of for your question, like I still seek counseling. I still talk, and I still am open with my mental health wherever I can. So I tell my story a lot at work. the agency that I work for is a small organization. There's 230 employees, roughly. And back in June, I gave a mental health presentation to 30 senior executives, management, and administration. And I told them my side of the story and what mental health looks like for an employee. And I said that while you guys get those phone calls when I can't come into work, what you don't see is the potential 15, 30 hour of anxiety pacing back and forth, me wondering who's going to pick up the phone. What are they going to think? Are they going to believe me? Is this, I start to freak out because I start wondering, like, is this how I'm going to feel again tomorrow? Am I going to need to miss multiple days because of this? Is it coming back? And it really opened up their eyes. And there were some people in the room that genuinely didn't seem interested, but it's going to be like that anywhere in life, about any topic.
Yeah.
So I don't focus on those people as much. I focus on the people that are leaning in and that are engaged, and they want to buy into what I'm saying, and they want to understand what this looks like for an employee, because it could be their employees that are calling in sick, or maybe there's something going on in these programs that they're not noticing because they can't recognize the signs, or they don't know what it looks like. And this is an opportunity to take lived experience and share it with people that don't know what it looks like, and have them understand it, so when they see it next time, they can start to help. They can do something better, and they can prevent somebody from getting to where I was. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I live for now, is my recovery works best when I'm helping other people. And I find that if I can lift other people up, that they'll lift me up, and I'll just keep feeling better and better, and I can help people around me while I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I mean, like, that's a very similar thing to what happened to me, that when I found purpose in sharing my story and found that it helped, that it made the enduring the, like you said, like the days of anxiety or those intense moments, that I don't want to say it made it worth it, but that at least, like, I know I'm gonna come out of the other side. I'm gonna share it with somebody, and like, it's gonna resonate with some people, and actually make things better. And it took like a mental illness to like just give me endless amounts of empathy for other people. Like, I just find myself looking at people differently, whereas before, if you would have asked me when I was 18, 19, 20, what I thought of people, I would have been, like, people are awful. People are shit.
Yeah.
And of course, there's still people like that. But now it's like, okay, that person's shit, but why?
Yeah.
What's the why? There's obviously a reason that person's raging on the internet, or yelling in traffic, or yelling at the kids on the lawn. You know what I mean? Like, I find myself interested in the why and what happened. And then you try to maybe find a connection on that level. And it sucks that it takes something so horrific happening to get a lot of people to that point, but at least it is a little bit of a blessing in disguise. I
100% agree. And it's funny that you say that, because like I said, I when the accident happened and all those people were standing around, there was I remember there was one person in particular that I said, "Are you on the phone with 911?" because I needed to tell them that he's not breathing anymore. And the guy's like, "No, I'm taping it." Like, he was videoing it. Yeah, that's big. So like, it was I was at that point, I was furious with people. And like, I still have a problem going into new scenarios, like large groups of people it's a new scenario to me. I'm terrible at networking. Yeah. But I'm starting to take off my armor and open up, and like, not be as guarded, and really give people an opportunity. But like, that did some damage. And it's, now that I know more about mental health, and I've looked into myself and therapy and things like that, like you said, I can see that there's something that's caused these people to be that way. And maybe the people that weren't doing anything, maybe they already knew what was going to end up happening to me, or like how that could affect me later on down the road. So I don't hold them as accountable.
Do you think that's why, like, when you heard that scream, that you experienced anger rather than sadness or another sort of emotion? Was it because you felt that during that scenario, like, you were all alone trying to do everything? Like, was that ever part of your journey figuring it out?
Yes and no.
Okay.
What we ended up finding out through therapy, and it's like through just like constant digging deeper and people asking questions, was that by the end of that situation, I hated not the people, I hated myself, because I thought that this was on me. Like, I lost his life. It wasn't the fact that he was in a terrible accident. It was my actions that cost him his life, and my delay and my inability to move him properly and things like that. So it was dealing with that more than dealing with the fact that nobody would help. And the approach that we took to that was kind of finding a way for me to come to terms with the way that that day played out. And for the people that didn't react, it was understanding that maybe that situation was too intense for them. Like, at the end of the day, human beings are animals, and we have one of two responses to danger and chaos, which is the fight or flight.
Yeah.
So flight now could be standing around not doing anything. Whereas, like, back in the Stone Ages, flight is you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, but we don't have those things anymore. We have new dangers that are in suits, and they come in the form of machines being in accidents and things like that. So it was really understanding how the human mind works and our reaction to trauma and chaos, and me understanding that not everyone's going to react the same way that I did, and forgiving them for that.
What about, like, do you still get, like, the nightmares of it, or has that pretty much tapered off for the most part? Like,
it's the nightmares of the scenario don't really come anymore.
Yeah.
It's more I'm afraid of things that are out of my control. So my kids, for example, like, if they're every morning I walk my kids to the bus, and the idea of them running into the street terrifies me. So I overreact to them being too close to the curb. Like, I might yell and be like, "Yo, get back from the curb." And it doesn't really need to happen. There's no cars. There's no nothing. It's just that I feel like I need to be in control of situations all the time. So that's something that I'm dealing with now, is just being able to understand that there's a reason that I don't control it, and to accept that type thing. So
yeah, wow, that's a hard one to get around for sure.
Yeah.
Now you're on the other side. You're trying to build something and implement mental health in workplaces. One of, I just had Nina on, and off mic I was describing what she did, and this is the previous episode, but we were talking about what makes a workplace mental health like look bad. Like, what happens? What are some of the scenarios? One of my biggest critiques is I feel when people, get thrust into a manager position for the first time, it's usually based on performance. You're a high performing individual, and that, you have some results, whether that's on the business end, whether it's, you're a hard worker, you do the work, whatever, positive attitude, and you get put in that position. And now all of a sudden you're just in charge of a group of people, you're learning budgets for the first time, and there's never that adequate, like, training. Like, hey, we're going to sit you down for 2 weeks, and you're going to learn about people and how to react. It's just kind of just like, you're figure it out as long as you go. And if you have any questions, like, we're here, maybe, kind of. I feel like that's one of my biggest things. And I know going through my mental illness journey, my boss wasn't prepared for the things that I was dealing with. And when she told me, "I'm here if you need to talk," and I talked, it was just like, whoa. Yeah. Okay. That's one of my biggest critiques. Yeah. What are some of the types of things, in what you're helping companies do, part of this national standard that you believe in, need to be implemented, at least, like, if we're just talking a basic sense, to help get this businesses on the right path?
So one of the biggest things that, outside of this, so there's a survey that you can take for your organization. It's called the Guarding Minds at Work survey. And it helps you identify the problem areas in your organization. So it's free to take. And what they do is they launch a survey for all your employees, and then you choose when the survey starts and when it finishes. And the moment that the survey finishes, so say that your end date is today at 6 p.m. As soon as your survey finishes, they send you aggregate data that they've collected from all your employees, and it shows you how your agency's done in the 13 psychological factors for your workplace. And it shows you based on what are serious concerns, moderate concerns, and then your successes, either moderate or complete success in the other areas. So once you've established that, you can really narrow in on what's wrong with your employees and where you need to improve. So when our agency did that, what we ended up doing was we chose a product that would help managers. So we have a problem with civility and respect and organizational culture. That's where we scored the lowest for our organization. So civility and respect, a lot of the questions from the survey are in regards to whether or not other people are open to your ideas and your thoughts, how easy it is to talk to other people, how easy it is to disclose health or anything like that in your organization. So when we realized that that was a problem, we ended up choosing a product called Not Myself Today, which is, again, a Canadian Mental Health Association product. And they send out these scenario cards, and you can either have an employee pack or a manager pack. And the manager pack helps you understand how to navigate tactfully a conversation where someone's disclosing their mental illness for the first time at work. So it prepares them for that scenario. So while when you sat down, chances are they didn't have any experience doing that. So this kind of prepares them to go through those conversations. And the scenario packs are like 10 different scenarios, and they're all pretty relevant to taking pretty much any kind of level of storm that might be coming at them when they sit down and they have that conversation. It also teaches them how to initiate the conversation if they believe that something might be wrong. And that could be through like telltale signs would be like obviously a reduction in productivity or absenteeism or presenteeism in the workplace. If they're starting to look a little rough or tired, and like a manager can sit them down and say, hey, like, how can we help? And this gets them ready for those scenarios. The other thing that they have is they have a disclosing mental health info sheet. So it's for employers and managers to read over. And it tells you everything that you need to know about duty to accommodate, the pros and cons of disclosing your mental health at work and how you should go about doing it, and the steps that you should follow. So if I had something like that when this had happened to me, or if I even had a glimpse of that info sheet, I could have saved 4 years of a lot of pain. So we're sharing these things, these resources with these employers now because, like I said at the start of the show, 42% of Canadian employers are interested in launching a mental health program. They just don't know how. And that's an unfortunate and kind of scary statistic if you think about it.
I think it's a little low in my opinion.
You know what? That was based on, I think, 600 and something organizations nationwide. So CMHA did that survey. So that's only on 600 and so organizations. So I agree, it's probably low. Yeah. Reality is there's a lot more than 600 organizations that are in Canada.
Well, and I hope they're interested. You know what I mean? Like like I don't know where a lot of corporations are at. You know, I'm very fortunate that I work for one that it is, could do more, but honestly is very good and concerned and willing to help and accommodate. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. But I look at other industries and you look at the way society's built. Yeah. And it's not built to accommodate mental health at the workplace, right? Well, we had a discussion on the last episode about meritocracy. So are you familiar with that term? No. So it's that we have built success in society based on your merit. So, that person who goes above and beyond, who works long hours for free most of the time, who just puts a lot of effort in, they're usually the ones who get rewarded.
Yes, okay.
So what that does is, some people are really good at that and they can handle that, and it's great, good for them. But a lot of the time, a lot of people can't handle that, and then you get into the problems of work-life balance and burnout, and that we've created this society because we reward that hustle, that grind, that suck it up attitude. Like that's what gets rewarded. I know a conversation I've had in the past is that if I want to be a leader, I need to be level-headed. I need to, which is correct, but like I can't get too low and I can't get too high. It has to be that.
Balance,
and when I look at myself, am I going to try? Absolutely. But based on my mental illness, like it is really difficult. That's going to be a struggle for me, and I don't truly know if I ever will. We'll have to see. That's down the road. But you know, you have a perception of what a leader is and what success looks like, and that's not built on a healthy work environment, in my opinion, a lot of the time.
I agree.
So it's just unfortunate. Like, I don't think we're on a sustainable system. Basically, you know, hopefully there's people like you, there's people like Nina, there's people out there who are trying to make a difference and change the culture. It's going to take a long time.
It is.
But like good for you guys for fighting that battle. But it's going to be tough.
It is, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I just read an article today that the Huffington Post put out, and it's about how we need to change our approach to mental health in the workplace, and it's becoming a like catastrophic level of health issues are coming from work-related mental health right now.
Yeah. And costing a lot of money.
It is. I think the last statistic that I saw was $51 billion a year. And when you look at that, like, sure, that's not great for the bottom line, but that's also not great for humanity, period. So the thing that I'm finding that, and I'm sure that you'll agree with this, is that when we humanize the experience and we put a face to recovery and to trauma and what can come of it, that's when we're going to see the most buy-in from people that have never sought help before. And when we have conversations like the one that we're having right now, or if you're doing your podcast, and I know that on the 14th you're doing a thing at Invest Ottawa for Hey Manager.
It's called, so it's a foundation I started working with called Made of Millions.
Yes.
It's a very similar story. It really focuses on mental health at the workplace based on, you know, they have a long story of someone starting it because of workplace. The person I'm working with in Canada has an experience with mental health in the workplace, and that's how it got started. So this night is based on having like a panel of like CEOs and scientists and and you just talk about that type of stuff. And you just, like you said, you have that open dialogue and you're real. What are businesses doing right? What are they doing wrong? Having employees have the chance to ask questions.
Yes.
Because it's complicated, and you know, people are scared to talk about it still. Even I am. I'm super open about it all the time, but there's certain things I still don't disclose.
Yes.
Because I'm afraid of what the reaction might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree, but the fact that you're doing that and that you're sharing your story, and we have things like weareunsinkable.com and Sick Not Weak, the more that people are sharing their stories on platforms like that, I really believe that we'll start seeing more buy-in from the people that haven't sought out help before. And that includes CEOs and management that have never experienced mental health before, don't understand it, see it as a costly thing in their workplace. But I think that when we stand up and show the successes or show the change that can come from being supported in the workplace with your mental health, I think that that's when we're going to see more people changing their minds and implementing programs and things like that. So I 100% agree that it's going to be a long journey. But I think that just remaining consistent and pushing towards a goal that might be bigger than us right now, but later on down the line, like maybe we won't see that change in our generation, like by the time that we retire. But if we can make an impact in our time that we're here and we're working towards it, then that's what I'm focused on right now more than anything, is just bringing that change. And I have an opportunity to do it. I've been given the opportunity to do it for my organization. And I'm hoping that by doing things like sitting down with you, I have an opportunity to get more invitations to come in, because I don't charge for this. Like, this is something that I will sit down and I will go on Skype after work, and I will explain to you how to, from start to finish, implement the national standard in your organization. And if you need help, reach out. And it's not something that I feel I can put a price on right now, because I feel that I owe too much to myself and too much to other people to be charging for this right now. And I just want to help, and I want other people to just better their work environment for their employees, because like I said a few times now, I work in disability services. So every day I get to help somebody that without my help wouldn't be able to leave the mark that they want to leave in this world. They're not physically capable of doing it. And if I'm not at my absolute best, I might not be able to get them to that point. Like, I might not be able to take them to what they want to see or do what they want to do, because I'm too worried about myself, or I'm too upset with myself, and I just don't have the motivation, or I don't know where to start, and I don't want to get on the computer and do hard work because I feel so crappy. If we could prevent that from happening and just help more people and help the people that are in service to others, that provide services to others, like I just want everyone to not be the guy in traffic yelling, like you said earlier, or like the guy on the internet leaving shitty comments.
That's the big one for me right now, is how do you end the trolling and the negative behavior on social media. Like that's going to be a big focus soon, because that's detrimental to a lot of people.
It's funny that you, because I obviously listen to your show. I'm a fan of the show, which is how we connected in the first place. But I've heard you mention it a few times in episodes, like the comment threads, and you have a hard time with them.
Yeah.
And I've just started noticing, thankfully it's not on my content. I'm not big enough yet, but it's like, I'm still just getting started, but I'm noticing on, I think there's a app called BetterHelp. They advertise frequently on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. They come up all the time. They're a counseling service that you can access through an app. And the amount of negative comments supersedes their moderator's ability to get rid of it, because I'm sure their marketing platform they go nationally instead of just narrowing it down to just the Ottawa area. So they're getting people from all over. But the amount of disrespect to the type of service that they're providing, and just downplaying people's needs for the service that doesn't get addressed in time is detrimental to people seeking help. So if you post something about mental health on your social media and somebody gets to it before you have a chance to moderate the comments, or I don't even know if you do that or not with your own content, but say someone goes on and leaves a super shitty comment about how like, man up, you're being a little bitch or whatever, and other people see that might prevent them from seeking actual help, because they don't want to be perceived as that as well. Or the one that I've heard you guys talk about before too, is that people saying that you're seeking attention, or all you're looking for is attention.
That's the big one.
That's a super shitty way to talk to anybody about mental health. And I don't think that anybody that is brave enough to disclose their story or disclose their mental health on a public platform should ever have anybody say that they're seeking attention. But on the flip side, if I'm telling my story and someone thinks that I'm seeking attention, moving forward, like if I see that in a comment, I'll say, absolutely I am. Because the more that you look at it and the more that you look at me, the more you start thinking about mental health in the right light. And maybe that response is all I need, but I don't, at the same time, you don't want to be battling back and forth with trolls, right?
Yeah. You need to. So, I'm in a weird spot in my thought process, because I'm very much a believer in freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So the answer is no. I don't moderate any comments. Thankfully, I'm not big enough yet at this point. Yeah. Maybe someone listening to this in a couple of years is going to go look back and be like, "You're big enough now," and that's the hope, right? Leaving them, but you got to leave that. I think that would be a really good response. Absolutely, I am. And just leave it at that, and then you walk away from it. Yeah. The majority of people will look at that and be like you won. That was your clapback, whatever the generation uses now. But that, like, most people recognize, like, you're right, that someone could be deterred from it. But the majority of people, I think, recognize that's just a troll, a shitty comment, a shitty person. Why is that person again, going back to our thought process, why is that person commenting that? Well, chances are they're probably going through something they're feeling weak, they're insecure, you know, who knows? It's unfortunate that they feel the need. That's how I've actually started to think about answering people when they have not a valid criticism, you know, like one of those shitty comments.
They're
like
just
that.
taking jabs.
It's like, yeah, it's unfortunate you think that way. You know, spread love.
Yeah.
Whatever. A comment like that where you've acknowledged it, but like you basically shut it down. It's not open for debate.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the unfortunate things about everything in terms of content or media or whatever it is, that you really aren't making a meaning. Well, you haven't made it unless you're receiving negative feedback.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah.
that's one of the big things. If you're not getting criticized, you're not.
If someone doesn't hate you, you haven't made it yet.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted to say you're not doing something meaningful unless someone criticizes you, which is not true. But along that idea that like people criticize people doing meaningful things because whatever the reasons are, I don't know. They're again insecure. They're feeling like, you know, they thought of that idea and they didn't act on it. Now they see this person doing it and they're like, yeah, fuck that person.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, there's 7 billion people in this world. You know, a good comment I've always said is you get 100 people in a room, you're at least one of them is going to be a piece of shit. Like, you can't fix that. People will always be like that. But I like your thought. Like, you got to focus on the positive, on you know, your mission. It's like, you know what, you think that way. That's unfortunate for you. I hope you see the light.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue on because, you know, there is a lot of value that people have in normalizing these types of conversations, you know, that just you opening up about, you know, you might not have to get into all the nitty gritties, but just having a general sense of what you're feeling. You know, someone it resonates with people. They go, fuck, like, I feel that way too. Like, maybe I should go seek help. Like, I get those thoughts. I get anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, like talking about what a panic attack feels like, or talking about the depression feels like, or the anger that you were feeling, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
people, like, I know when I was going through it, I didn't recognize that as something I needed to talk about. I was just like, oh, like, I'm feeling, I didn't even know it was anxiety. I'm just like, oh, like, I don't want to do this thing. Not recognizing anything beyond that until you start hearing more about it. You get, you know, Sick Not Weak and Bell Let's Talk Day, and that was really kind of the start of it. And now you get you got all these platforms, and you get people like us talking, and you have more events, and you have more the campaigns and ad campaigns and apps and all this stuff. It's growing, but we need to remember that also this really only started 4 years ago at the time. Like, we're 2019 now. Like, 2015 is when I remember it actually having an effect on the world around me. Before that, I don't remember anyone really talking about it, and that could have just been in my circle, and, you know, who I followed on social media or whatever. But it wasn't a normal topic unless you talked about it directly with, like, your parent or your doctor, someone in that. Like, it just wasn't a topic around normal everyday life. Yeah,
it's true. And it's, I think around that time was when Movember had switched from just being prostate cancer to
somewhere around there too,
men's overall health, or like mental health. They were including that as well. So it's whatever the shift was, I'm thankful for it, because, like I said, it's the more people that stand up and have these conversations, the more people that we can help. And that's all we're looking to do at this point. Yeah.
The more I'm thinking about it, I'm looking into, like, peer support type things.
Yeah.
You know, I had Michael Dixon on, and I'm not sure if you listened to that episode.
Funeral director.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And they started the first Canadian peer support network because, you know, all the shit they deal with, and there was no help.
Yeah.
But I think of it as, you know, what if there were people like you and I and people who suffered from, you know, mental health disorder, mental illness, whatever, and you just get together and you kind of just, you normalize it. Like, you have conversations and you kind of make light of it in a way that, like, you beat it by being like, oh yeah, like, I get nervous about going out to do this thing too. It's so stupid. And you're like, oh yeah, me too. And you almost just, like, push it down, like, oh yeah, it's just, you know, it is a big thing, but it isn't. Like, we all deal with this, and it just kind of gives that sense of, like, a community around it. And
Absolutely.
I've been thinking about that idea recently. I'm like, wonder if that because I don't know if there is things like out that.
There's some, like I know that there's first responders have a lot of peer support systems in place.
As they should, but
yeah.
like for normal day people, you
Yeah.
know, just regular day government work or whatever you do.
You and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just, it's almost like, I don't want it, when I think of it, I don't want it to be like a clinical setting where you have a doctor and you're it's just like literally people with some sort of like just with a mental illness, and you're just getting together with other people like that, and you're just talking about your experiences and making small talk and recovery. What do you do? What do you do? One of my favorite things to ask is like, you know, and I'll ask the question like, what do you do on like a day-to-day maintenance level for it? You know, like, you know, I need to hit the gym beforehand. Like that's why I said I got to get here at a certain time because I need to work out before this, or I'm going to be off.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big thing. Fixing my diet, the social circles, all that stuff. But what are some things you do? Like meditation? Do you try any of that? Yoga?
So funny enough, I have wanted to try meditation forever.
I'm in the same boat.
And I've downloaded the apps. I have Calm. I have Headspace and stuff like that. And I've just never gotten to it. And I don't know why. I'm interested, but
I'm like,
don't know why.
you're like, that's exactly me. And I'll ask people about, like, how do you meditate? Oh, no, they'll tell me all about it. And I'm like, okay, I hear so many great things I'm going to do. And I'm just like, I never get onto it.
I don't know what it is, but there's something about it that I've never been able to really invest it. So, a day so you're asking what a day looks like for me in terms of
like, what do you do? What are some maybe routines or things you do daily or weekly to just that mental health maintenance, making sure you're right? Yeah.
So the first thing that I do every single day is I make my bed, and I'll get to that in a second as to why I do that. But I make my bed, and I work alternating shift work, so my day changes based on what my routine shifts based on my rotation at work. But every day I get to the gym. I get outside if I can. I'll go for a hike or I'll go for a walk or whatever. Being outside is a big part of recovery for me and just feeling better. But I go to work, I come home, and I have I spend some time with my wife and my kids, and then I also have some time where it's just me to decompress because, like I said, I have a job which unfortunately can be loud and very taxing mentally on its own. So I have time where I just decompress, and I play board games that are designed for one player.
Interesting.
It's a way for me to have alone time, escape reality, and still use my brain. I'm not a big fan of sitting down in front of a TV, and especially if the day's been hard and watching really anything. Sometimes I just want silence, so I do that, and I think about whatever the task at hand that I'm doing in whatever game that it is that I'm playing. So that's what that is. But the reason why I make my bed was that there's this Navy admiral whose name is William McRaven, I believe his name is, and he gave this speech about how the way to successfully start and end your day is to have the first thing that you ever do every single morning is to make your bed. And the reason is because by the time you're done making your bed, you've already completed the first task of the day. You're ready to complete the next. So you're just focusing on, you can have long-term goals, but focus on the steps and small steps to get to those long-term goals. And that's how you can define success at the end of your day, regardless if it went good or not. So I'll make my bed. I'll go and I'll complete my next tasks. I might make some advancement on spreading my message on social media or sitting down with you. Like, I consider this a success just to be able to sit down in a room and talk mental health with you. But for those days that are shit and nothing goes right, it's a hard day at work, at least when I get home, there's a bed that's made, it's waiting for me, and it showed me that I did something today. There was one thing that I did right at the start of the day, and that bed now looks like a second chance. I can go to bed, and tomorrow I can try again.
Yeah.
And just repeat that process.
I didn't know who said it, but I remember hearing that too. So I adopted the same thing. And you just get in that mindset of you're right. You've completed one task.
Yeah.
So the day wasn't a complete failure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I do too. And I have like I eat my breakfast and have my coffee, or I do the same things. Just some things that, like, if things go a little off, it's like you kind of have like just a little bit of a guide map just to keep you on track. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like I just do these things and at least,
Yeah.
you know, just fit it in my day. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm always interested to hear what like other people are doing, if it's similar or like, can I pick something else new up? Like I know I talked to Michael and I talked to Sabrina, and they're like, they meditate an hour a day. I'm like, whoa, like
Yeah.
how do you get into that? But they do, and it works for them, and I would love to be able to do that. But at the start, it's like, it's daunting. It's like, oh my God, an hour a day.
Yeah, I don't even. I know that Headspace has like a 10-minute introduction one. And
Yeah.
I remember being like a couple minutes into it, and I had to get up with one of the kids, and it's just like I never got back to it because I felt I couldn't. But
And that's when you get kids and you get people relying, that's where it really kind of starts to throw it all. It's
Yeah.
easy for me. I'm single. Like I don't have to. I get up at the same time. Don't have to worry about anything really disrupting it.
yeah,
But yeah, when you start throwing in kids, that's where,
yeah,
you know, how am I going to get to the gym? I got to pick up, you know,
yeah,
drop them off at school, and they got an appointment. Like, where am I going to fit time to work out and
Yeah.
go for a walk or whatever? Like, it's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
So
It's the best advice that I can give to people that are finding it difficult to do something like that is that focus on like mastering your day as opposed to like setting these goals. Like I want to lose 40 pounds in 3 months. That's my goal. That's cool, but like focus on just getting to the gym every single day and focus on that and take it a day at a time, because that's what recovery is.
yeah.
And if you can find a way to be successful frequently in a single day, that's better than setting these long-term goals and like having days where you feel like you completely offshot it, and or a couple of days where you feel like you're not getting towards your goals. Like just focus on day to day and slow everything down if you can. Even with kids, it's possible. Like I still get to the gym. I still get out for my walks. I still am able to have that decompressing time when I get home where it's just me. So it's possible. It's just, it gets trickier, but
Yeah.
you can definitely sit down and figure it out.
Perfect. Listen, man, hell of a story. Thank you for coming in and sharing it.
Yeah. Thanks for
That's,
giving me a platform to share it.
It's something I think there's a lot of things people can take away from it, because, you know, it's always unfortunate that people kind of have to reach that bottom to get that rise and kind of come out on the other side with sort of like an inspirational story.
Yeah.
But you know, it's people like you that are working hard on their own time, no money associated with it, just completely selfless to changing the world. Like need more people like that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you do too, because one of my favorite quotes right now is that for sometimes when people are really, really down, courage doesn't come easy for them, and it takes courage to get out and seek help. So sometimes encouragement from the outside is what builds courage in people. So if we keep doing what we're doing, hopefully we can encourage people to become courageous enough to seek the help that they need and be the change that they want to see. And you'll have more people lining up to do interviews with stories just as good or even better than mine.
That's great, but also not great. I always say, you know, it's great people have these stories, and they're very interesting, compelling, and emotional. And it's like, it's always one of those things where you're like, I hate that, like, you have that story to tell at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'd rather everyone kind of just be regular in a
Be
way
okay.
where,
Yeah.
you know, like not have that sad
Yeah.
story where it changes things. But unfortunately, I guess that's human life, right? So
Yeah.
we do what we can. If people want to find more information on you know what you're offering on these services, like if they want to get in contact with you for more information, how do they do that?
So the best way to contact me would be, you can find me on social media under I am Stoutheart. That's both on Twitter and Instagram. And then you can look me up on LinkedIn as well, at just under Greg Swaine. I think I'm the only one in the world that spells it with an E at the end. So that's how you can find me. And then our story is going to be shared continuously through weareunsinkable.com. And I think that's getting published in early November, I want to say. But it's like what we covered today, but it also goes through all the steps on how we built the program, like this mental health program, using products through the Canadian Mental Health Association, which are all free. And we coach people on how they can implement them in their organizations. And we kind of break it down into previews, and we talk about how our organization, the trials and errors that we went through. So it's designed specifically, that content is going to be designed specifically to help organizations build their own
that's
mental
great.
health systems.
I have a story coming out. I don't know when it's coming out, but I wrote something for them. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
that's great.
It's in the queue. So
Awesome.
that's an interesting one too. That just kind of came out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, cool, and started reading into it. And
Yeah, it's new as of April this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll catch up down the road for sure.
Absolutely, man.
Greg Swaine, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit